Greetings, John Thompson here, and thank you again for joining me in another study session in regards to how Jesus Christ fulfills all seasons. And so far, our study has been coming from the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 3, and we've already looked at verses 2 and 3. Again, to recap, we've already talked about a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to pluck up that which is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up. Now we're on the first part of verse 4. Verse 4 says a time to weep and a time to laugh. That's going to be the crux of our discussion today. A time to weep and a time to laugh. As we think about weeping and laughing, we see these two words used by Jesus Christ. And again, this study is about how Jesus Christ fulfills all seasons, and we're going to look at circumstances with weeping and laughing, more so looking at rejoicing. So, to start, let's look at Luke chapter 6 and verse 21. Blessed are ye that hunger now, for ye shall be filled. Blessed are ye that weep now, for ye shall laugh. Remember that. So I want to make mention in that, if you're taking notes, right there, Job 14:1, and then also John chapter 16 and verse 33. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But again, the latter part of verse 21, blessed are ye that weep now, for ye shall laugh. What are some things that causes sorrow? And as we think about things that bring sorrow and weeping in our lives, we can think of a plethora of things. So for this study, we're going to focus just simply on two situations. Situations of separation and situations of terror. And I have two passages, again, looking at the life of Christ, that mention those things. So when we think of separation, there are things that separate us. Somebody goes away on travel, or, military people go away on deployments, and, things of that nature. That's separation. But the separation that causes the weeping, the sorrow, is ultimately the separation of death. That's the first scenario we're going to look at. And as we go forward into Luke chapter 7 and beginning in verse number 12. Now when he came nigh to the gate of the city, behold, there was a dead man carried out, the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. And much people of the city was with her. And when the Lord saw her, he had compassion on her, and said unto her, Weep not. And he came and touched the bier, so B-I-E-R, and that's something similar to what we call nowadays a coffin. And they that bare him stood still, and he said, Young man, I say unto thee, arise. And he that was dead sat up and began to speak, and he delivered him to his mother. And there came a fear on all, and they glorified God, saying that a great prophet has risen up among us, and that God hath visited his people. And we can see the circumstance of rejoicing. But first, before that rejoicing came, there was that weeping because of that separation of death. But again, Christ was in control. Now we're going to look at terror. So as we go forward several chapters now, going to chapter 23. And as we look at chapter 23, now the situation is Christ is about to be crucified. Picking up on verse number 26. And as they led him away, they laid hold upon one Simon, a Cyrenian, coming out of the country, and on him they laid the cross, that he might bear it after Jesus. And there followed him a great company of people and of women, which also bewailed and lamented him. But Jesus, turning unto them, said, Daughters of Jerusalem, weep not for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For behold, the days are coming in which they shall say, Blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bare, and the paps which never gave suck. Then shall they begin to say to the mountains, Fall on us, and to the hills, cover us. A time of terror can cause weeping. And we can think of things that happen in this world that it's just sheer terror. We think of terrorism. That's a time to weep. But again, Christ is in control. And I told you, and I mentioned those chapters earlier. So again, going back to Job chapter 14 and verse number 1, a man born of a woman is a few days and full of troubles. We all got some troubles, and those troubles bring weeping. But again, what does Christ say in John chapter 16? And we're going to look at something else in John chapter 16 as well. But let's start with verse 33, and then we're going to work back up. So in verse 33, as Christ is talking to his apostles, he mentions, These things I have spoken unto you, that ye might have peace. In the world ye shall have tribulation. But be of good cheer, I have overcome the world. That's significant. And again, as we go up a couple of verses, Christ comforts them, and he's mentioned something very significant in verse number 22. So Christ is talking about how he makes mention of, and going to verse number 16, a little while ye shall not see me, and again a little while ye shall see me, because I go to the Father. And the disciples start going back and forth, what does this mean? But then he expounds to them in verse number 20, Verily, verily, I say unto you, that ye shall weep and lament, but the world shall rejoice. Now the world's going to rejoice because they are sorrowful. They're being forced to weep and lament. And he says it right here, ye shall be sorrowful, but your sorrow shall be turned to joy. And that's that similar language we saw earlier back in Luke chapter 6 and verse 21. Ye shall be sorrowful, but your sorrow shall be turned to joy. If you're taking notes in your Bible, right here I would mark or write in here, somewhere in the side portion here, Luke chapter 6 and verse 21. Verse 22 says, Now therefore you have sorrow, but I will see you again, and your heart shall rejoice, and your joy no man taketh from you. And as I thought about this passage, I also thought about what John, the same writer of this book, wrote in Revelation chapter 21, as he's receiving words from Jesus Christ. We learn of a new heaven and a new earth. Now watch how special this is. And I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth were passed away, and there was no more sea. And I, John, saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down from God out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a great voice out of heaven saying, Behold, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them. And they shall be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. And God will wipe away all tears from their eyes. There shall be no more death, neither sorrow, nor crying, neither shall there be any more pain, for the former things are passed away. And he that sat on the throne said, Behold, I make all things new. And he said, He said unto me, Write, for these words are true and faithful. And he said unto me, It is done. I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end. I will give unto him that is athirst of the fountain of the water of life freely. He that overcometh shall inherit all things, and I will be his God, and he shall be my son. Again, a place where there is no more death, no sorrow, nor crying. And we can imagine that there is a place of eternal joy. And again, that joy no one can take. Having that hope to receive this is a joy, and that joy no one can take from you. Christ has already overcome and given us that hope. So as we shift gears, as we shift the portion of this study, we talked quite a bit about weeping, a little bit about laughter, in the concept of rejoicing. But now let's focus on, when is the wrong time to laugh? When is the wrong time to laugh? And we see an example in Mark chapter 5. In Mark chapter 5, beginning in verse number 35, we see an example of when is the wrong time to laugh. So, beginning in verse number 35, this is as Jesus Christ is on the way to Jairus. He's a ruler of the synagogue, and he finds Christ, and he tries to talk Christ into following him to heal his daughter who is sick. And as he is on his way, we find in verse number 35, while he yet spoke, there came from the ruler of the synagogue's house certain which said, Thy daughter is dead. Why troublest the master any further? As soon as Jesus heard the word that was spoken, he said unto the ruler of the synagogue, Be not afraid, only believe. And he suffered no man to follow him, save Peter and James and John and the brother of James. And he cometh to the house of the ruler of the synagogue, and seeth the tumult, and them that wept and wailed greatly. And when he came in, he said unto them, Why make ye this ado, and weep? The damsel is not dead, but sleepeth. Verse 40, and they laughed him to scorn. But when he had put them all out, he taketh the father and the mother of the damsel, and them that were with him. He entered in where the damsel was lying. He took the damsel by the hand and said unto her, Talitha cumi, which is, being interpreted, Damsel, I say unto thee, arise. And straightway the damsel arose and walked, for she was of age of 12 years. And they were astonished with great astonishment. And he charged them straitly that no man should know it, and commanded that something should be given her to eat. So that's the whole context. But going back to verse 40, they laughed him to scorn. They didn't have the faith. And that lack of faith turned into mocking. So with that being said, laughter mixed with mocking is a time that we should not be laughing. So when someone is being mocked or made fun of, there should not be any laughter. So that's a lesson for us. So when someone is being made fun of, again, I don't want to be or keep repeating myself, but again, we see in this circumstance, they laughed him to scorn. So let's avoid that. When God gives us joy, and joy comes into our lives from God, that's when you let that laughter roll out. Let the rejoicing take place. But anything outside of that, if it's mixed with mocking and scorning someone, let's get rid of that. Alright, so we talked about weeping and laughing. And again, we've seen this take place in the life of Jesus Christ. As we bring this study to a close, I want to talk about the Ethiopian eunuch. And when we look in Acts chapter 8, and this account starts at about verse number 26. And the Ethiopian eunuch, he's on his way. He's sitting in his chariot and he's trying to read the book of Isaiah, and he's not able to comprehend what this particular passage is referring to. And Philip, God putting him at the right place at the right time, expounds or talks about how the passage is talking about Jesus Christ. And picking up at verse number 35. And Philip opened his mouth and began at the same scripture and preached unto him Jesus. And as they went their way, they came unto a certain water, and the eunuch said, See, here is water. What doth hinder me to be baptized? And Philip said, If thou believest with all thy heart, thou mayest. And he answered and said, I believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. And he commanded the chariot to stand still. And they went down both into the water, both Philip and the eunuch, and he baptized him. And when they come up out of the water, the Spirit of the Lord called away Philip, that the eunuch saw him no more, and he went his way rejoicing. That's where the eunuch story ends, or account ends. We don't hear any more scriptures about the Ethiopian eunuch. We don't even have his name. But the important thing to mention is how his story ends. Once he's introduced to Jesus Christ, once he obeys the gospel, according to Mark chapter 16, beginning in verse number 15 and 16. We see that how Christ said, Go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. He that believeth and is baptized shall be saved, but he that believeth not shall be damned. Now we see the Ethiopian eunuch obeyed the gospel, and the end of his story is rejoicing. He went his way rejoicing, and that's where his story ends. So that's a reminder for us today as we think about the study of weeping and laughing. Let's remember the words of Jesus Christ as we looked at Luke chapter 6 and verse 21 earlier. Blessed, and this is the latter end of verse 21. Blessed are ye that weep now, for ye shall laugh. In this life we will have trouble, but Christ has already overcome. He has already given us a way out to escape the troubles of this life and look forward to the joy of spending eternity with God in heaven. And again, that's a joy no one can take from you. Thank you for listening to this study and studying with me today on how Jesus Christ fulfills all seasons. If you have any questions, please reach out in the comment section below.